All right, so the most intriguing division in football might be the NFC West, not only because every team still has a chance to win the division, but also because a couple teams are getting hot and healthy at the right time. So I've got to talk about a team I think might win the division, the Panthers wanting to become the next Detroit Lions, another potentially serious quarterback injury, and more right after. First up, the Carolina Panthers just extended one of their young star players. They don't have a ton of star players, but they inked Chuba Hubbard to a 4-year, $33.2 million extension. That comes with a max value of $37.2 million and $15 million in new guarantees. On the surface, it's clear to see that Chuba Hubbard definitely deserved this extension. He's having a career year with 665 rushing yards and 5 touchdowns while averaging 5 yards per carry. He's not as effective in the pass game. I mean, he's catching nearly 3 passes per game, but he only has a little over 100 receiving yards through 9 games. But take a look at where he stacks up amongst other running backs in the NFL. He's 10th in the league in touches, 5th in rushing yards, 7th in yards per carry, 10th in yards after contact per carry, and 7th in rushing first downs. So by all accounts, this man is playing like a top 10 running back this year, and the Panthers rewarded him for that by making him the 9th highest paid back in the league, at least in terms of annual value. So on the surface, Chuba deserves this, but the Panthers running back situation is a little confusing to me. They just drafted Jonathan Brooks 46th overall in this year's draft, actually being the first running back off the board. He hasn't played this season as he's been recovering from an ACL tear in his final year of college, but the Panthers just activated him to the 53-man roster yesterday, and he's going to make his season debut here very soon. There's no problem with having 2 good running backs on your roster, but what about investing in 3 of them? Yeah, they put money down on Chuba, extended him, again, well worth it. Then a 2nd-round pick used to draft Brooks. That's a pretty big investment, but believe it or not, it doesn't stop there. On top of Hubbard and Brooks, they just signed Miles Sanders to a 4-year, $25 million deal last season. He has been a bit of a disappointment, though, since arriving in Carolina. If you look at the difference in his yards per carry from his first 4 years in Philly, for example, to his 1.5 years in Carolina, you can see the difference. He did go from a top Eagles offensive line to the Panthers, but Chuba Hubbard is still averaging 5 yards per attempt compared to Sanders in his 3.7, so the O-line isn't fully to blame here. So maybe the Panthers see the future of their running back room being Hubbard and Brooks, and they opt to cut ties with Sanders after this season. They can move on from him with minimal dead money after all is said and done. Now, I set all that up to say this. Maybe the Panthers aspire to become the next Detroit Lions, at least with their running back room. The Lions signed David Montgomery in 2023, and they just gave him a 2-year extension that made him the 7th highest paid back in the league here very recently. Then they went out and drafted Jahmyr Gibbs 12th overall in last year's draft. It definitely has worked out for Detroit as they currently have the 6th most rushing yards per game this year and is a huge reason as to why they're putting up over 32 points per game and are 7-1 at the moment. I mean, this is probably the best running back duo in the entire NFL. Detroit also has one of the most complete rosters in football. They're the only team in the league that has a top scoring offense and a top 5 scoring defense. So they kind of have the luxury of being able to splurge a little bit in one area since they don't have any glaring holes on their roster. I can't say the same for the Panthers, though, but as I explained at the end of this segment, they kind of do have some fun money, especially if they are keeping a rookie quarterback on the roster. Obviously, the Panthers aren't a competitive team right now. They're 2-7 and are lacking talent on both sides of the ball. So investing this much into the running back room, while it does come with question marks, they do have Bryce Young as their quarterback on the roster, or if they move on from him and draft another guy next year, Carolina will still have the luxury of having a quarterback on a rookie deal. So when you have that, you can afford to splurge a bit while they try and figure things out. Next up, it was reported yesterday that Trevor Lawrence is dealing with some soreness in his non-throwing shoulder and is questionable for Sunday's game against the Vikings. But it appears this could be way worse news than initially believed. Look at this. Jay Gruden, yes, the former NFL coach and brother of John Gruden, said that sources are telling him Lawrence will require surgery on that shoulder, which means you might not see him for the rest of the season. Well, Ian Rappaport kind of shut this down a little bit. He responded to this report, or this tweet rather, saying, "No surgery scheduled, Jay. There are several options down the road. That's one of them. He's considered day-to-day with a left shoulder." Ian then said that Lawrence will likely not play this Sunday, which would mean that Mac Jones would get the start for the Jags against a very good Vikings team. The Patriots traded Mac Jones to the Jags this past offseason for a 6th-round pick, sending Jones to the city he actually grew up in. He's played against the Vikings just once in his career on Thanksgiving a couple years ago, and while the Patriots did lose that game, he torched Minnesota's secondary, throwing for nearly 400 yards and 2 touchdowns. This is a much better Vikings defense this time around, though, and the 2-7 Jags are definitely going to have their work cut out for them on Sunday, but maybe we see some vintage Mac Jones out there, especially with Lawrence most likely not able to play. And hopefully he's not done for the season, but if so, that is a tough blow for what it's worth for the Jags, whose season is already basically over. And speaking of the Jags, we've all seen Saquon Barkley's ridiculous backwards hurdle against them last week. Well, apparently Saquon said he got drug tested right after the game, which is actually fantastic. I mean, I don't blame the NFL one bit here. That was one of the most superhuman things I've ever seen on a football field, so I would be testing him for more than just performance-enhancing drugs, because this dude had some massive cojones for even attempting that backwards hurdle. And speaking of things that are massive, the Rams got some massive news today as they're getting not 1, but 2 starting offensive linemen back from IR. Left guard Steve Avila and center Jonah Jackson both had their 21-day practice windows open up, which means they could be activated to the 53-man roster and play as soon as this week. Sean McVay said earlier this week that he expects Jonah Jackson to be good to go for their Monday night game against the Dolphins, with Avila having a chance to play as well. Avila has been out since he suffered a knee injury in week 1, and Jackson has been out since he injured his knee in week 2, so this is big news for LA, because on top of those 2 linemen returning soon, they also activated offensive tackle Joe Noteboom from injury reserve a couple days ago. So that's 3 offensive linemen back in the mix, and with the Rams currently ranked 31st in their pass blocking grade according to PFF, gag, I can't overstate just how crucial the return of these 3 players is for this team. You combine that with the recent return of both Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua, Matt Stafford's favorite targets out there, and I think the Rams are once again a real problem to be dealt with and could very well win the division. It didn't look good at first. They started out 1-4, but have since rattled off 3 straight wins. They are 4-4 right now, and a couple games behind in the division to the Cardinals, because the Cardinals beat them week 2. But the NFC West is basically wide open at the moment. And while the Rams do have a few tough games against the Eagles, Bills, and 49ers up ahead on their schedule, they also have games they very well could win. Dolphins, Patriots, Saints, Jets, and even the Seahawks, who they just beat on the road last week in that overtime thriller. So the Rams are trending up, while the Tampa Bay Buccaneers are trending down. They lost Chris Godwin for the rest of the season with that ankle fracture, and Mike Evans is expected to miss a couple more games with a hamstring injury. They started out 4-2 this season, but have now dropped 3 straight games and have fallen 2 games behind Atlanta in their division. On top of that, Baker Mayfield is dealing with a toe injury sustained in last week's loss to the Chiefs. He should be good to play from what I understand, but might not be 100% out there. And if that wasn't enough, the Bucs are facing off against another team in the NFC, different division, but another team in the Rams division in the San Francisco 49ers, who might have Christian McCaffrey back. I'm not 100% sure if McCaffrey plays this week or not, but he recently told Richard Sherman on his podcast that he most likely could have played against the Cowboys, but was held out to be overly cautious. Well, all signs seem to be pointing to him playing this week, if not the week after. And all of this is why I'm so intrigued by this division, the NFC West. Cardinals, Rams, 49ers, Seahawks. Everybody's close. Nobody's truly out of it. The 49ers are getting healthy. The Rams are getting very healthy and heating up. And this could be anybody's division by season's end. But let me know your thoughts on how things are looking and who you think may come out on top in the NFC West. And with that, I'll see y'all next time.